But my last one is a big one. It's from one of my favorite directors, but it's actually, I think, probably of everything, I think it's his least appreciated movie for what it is, because I think it's one of his best films. Bringing Out the Dead by Martin Scorsese.
Also known as Bad EMT.
Also known as Bad EMT. Yes, it's by Ferns and I. It's a great pairing with Bad Lieutenant. This is a movie. Scorsese made it in, I think, 1999. It stars Nicolas Cage as an EMT, ambulance driver. It follows him basically over the course of 3 nights as he nearly loses his sanity. This movie, I was thinking about it over the last few days, and I kind of came up with a hypothesis about why it was so underappreciated and is still so underappreciated and so overlooked in spite of being a Martin Scorsese movie. I think it's because it kind of comes at a weird point in his career. It's one of the movies that comes in that sort of no man's land that is the end of his first De Niro period, which basically stretches from Mean Streets to Casino in the mid-90s, and the beginning of his DiCaprio period, which started in the early 21st century with Gangs of New York and continues on into the present day. And I know it kind of overlaps with the second De Niro period that we're in the middle of now, but just for the sake of simplicity, we've got the De Niro period and the DiCaprio period. And in between that, he did 2 movies that I think everybody tends to forget that he even did. He did Kundun, an epic about the Dalai Lama, which is also very underrated, and Bringing Out the Dead, which I just think is just a masterpiece. This is one of the best movies I've ever seen, and I can't believe more people don't know about it. It's based on a novel by an actual EMT driver. He based it on a lot of his own experiences, also called Bringing Out the Dead. It was adapted into a screenplay by Paul Schrader, and I think this movie sort of caps off what is really one of the great director-screenwriter collaborations in cinema history. Schrader and Scorsese, of course, also made Taxi Driver, and then Raging Bull, and then Last Temptation of Christ together. All of that sort of feeds directly into Bringing Out the Dead, which is kind of a culmination, I think, of that style, that storytelling approach, and those themes. The main character, the Nicolas Cage character, Frank, is somebody who's kind of going through a really horrible period where he hasn't saved anybody's life in a long time. It's eating away at him. He's racked by guilt. He's seeing ghosts everywhere he looks in New York City, particularly the face of this young woman named Rose, who pretty much died in his arms. And he's just becoming increasingly desperate for something to save him and redeem him. It's basically about how his quest for redemption is sort of an arrogant folly. The movie is really fascinating and unusual and powerful in that sense, in that it really digs as deep as any movie I've ever seen into why we help other people and why we should care about other people. It kind of takes a really hard look at that and makes a statement that I think most people who would watch the movie would not really want or be ready to hear, which is that most empathy and most of the things that we give to other people kind of come from selfish motivations. It's through wanting to make ourselves feel good. And the movie really fearlessly explores that. There's a lot of voiceover that the Nicolas Cage character gives of saying that, like, saving somebody's life is like a drug. You get a high off of it. You get addicted to it. And at a certain point, his job has become about maintaining that high and not about saving people. What the movie tries to dive into is how helping another person should not be about how it makes you feel, of how you should really be willing to help somebody even if it makes you feel bad. And that's a tough message, you know, to give to people, because I think everybody wants that easier answer. Like, you should help someone because it makes you feel good. Well, not always. Sometimes you feel terrible. Sometimes people are beyond help. but you should still help them anyway, just because it's the right thing to do. And the movie is filled with those sort of situations of things that can't really be set right, people that can't really be healed, lives that can't really be saved, but he has to continue saving them, trying to save them anyway, doing what he can because it's his job, and basically because it's why he's alive, is to do this. There just has to be someone there to try and ease the suffering, and he decides to take on that burden. And I think it's one of the most powerful movies Scorsese has ever made. And it's also one of his most incredibly photographed. Just the visual experience of it is unforgettable. Robert Richardson's cinematography, his lighting, almost all of the movie takes place at night. And he just sort of renders New York as just this viscerally overwhelming, like hellish purgatory, you know, filled with lost, suffering souls. It's got a great soundtrack, as all of Scorsese's films do. He makes incredible use of Van Morrison and The Clash in this one. There's all sorts of incredible editing by Thelma Schoonmaker. It really is just frenetic in places. It's reflecting, you know, this character's manic mindset that he's sort of descending into as insomnia and desperation, you know, take their toll on him, and he has to continue driving this ambulance night after night.
I think Nicolas Cage is kind of the perfect person for the lead for that, of representing that
Hell yeah.
descent into madness. Like my hope is that people come across this movie accidentally almost, because Nicolas Cage is somewhat of a controversial actor in terms of people. It seems like it's been this ongoing debate for like 20 years now of is Nicolas Cage actually a good actor, or is he accidentally good because directors put him in things and he acts crazy? And I think you and me both have always been big fans of him, and I think both of us don't think there's any accident about the choices he's making and the performances he's giving. He's a great actor, and one that just takes risks that many actors aren't willing to take in terms of how they appear on screen and how people are going to perceive them. It's kind of a quintessential role for him, and one that isn't just big, broad. I think there's so much like pain in the movie that he communicates so well.
It's been released on DVD. I think you can still find it fairly easily. I believe it's, you know, streaming, or I don't know if it's streaming, but I think it's on VOD in places. So you can find it, but I would love, you know, just to see like a really great Blu-ray release.
Didn't you meet Thelma Schoonmaker at like at a bookstore or something? And didn't you ask her about the movie?
Yeah, actually I did. When I was living in Seattle, there was this rental store called Scarecrow Video, which is actually, I think, the largest video rental store in the entire country. And Thelma Schoonmaker made an appearance there. I got her. She actually signed my Criterion Blu-ray of Last Temptation of Christ. So I have that somewhere. I'd have to go find it. But I actually got to talk with her a little bit. She's a very sweet, very kind woman. And she was asking me, like, what's your favorite of Marty's movies? And I said, I think probably Bringing Out the Dead. And she said, I was actually really happy to hear this. She said, like, you know, more and more people have been bringing that movie up to me. I'm really happy, because we were both really proud of that film. And it seemed like nobody saw it. But she said, like, it usually takes about 10 years for a movie that doesn't hit initially to find its audience. And she said, like, it's been about 10 years. And now people are starting to bring that one up. And she said, like, I'm going to have to talk to some people at Criterion, see if we can get a Blu-ray of that out. And I was just like, yes, please. I would buy that.
Like, if you want to start a petition, I'll sign it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, gosh, that incident was like 10 years ago. So, man, it must be hard to make calls to that place. Maybe they don't have their phones plugged in or something, because Schoonmaker and Tarsem both can't get through to anybody there. So